in the doctor's office in a chair. And in the chair next to was his mother. They were sitting waiting for the doctor to come in. As they were sitting there, the mother's mind started wandering back in time. Now normally she was a strong woman, and the boy knew that because she had a good game face. But today he saw that she didn't have her game face on. She seemed very apprehensive and very concerned. And as her mind wandered back in time, back to 7 years before, she was thinking about a day very much like that day when she was sitting in that same doctor's office next to that same boy, waiting for the same doctor to talk about the same health concern. Now back then, when the boy was only 6 years old, the day turned out to be a very, very bad day. Back then, the doctor came in to the room, turned, looked at the mother and said, "I'm very sorry, but I'm going to recommend that you put your 6-year-old son into a permanent institution because it's unlikely that he's ever going to be able to function in normal society." Well, that broke the mother's heart. Can you imagine if you had told that about your son? But the mother had 5 children, and this was her youngest son. And one of the things that she had learned was that you don't take the words of experts without also taking it with a healthy dose of skepticism. So she walked out that day, her and her boy, determined to find a solution. He was having seizures dozens of times every day, and they knew that they weren't going to be able to control the epilepsy or be able to cure the epilepsy, but they thought they might be able to find ways to control the seizures so that he would at least be able to live some normal kind of life. So she sought dietary treatments and drug treatments, and that was a struggle for them. And she was remembering all of that when the doctor walked into the room. And he came in and he sat down and he looked first at the boy and then at the mother, and he said, "Well, I've got some good news for you today. We cut the medications in half last month, and there have been no seizures, no recurrences of symptoms. So I'm going to just stop all prescription medications now. I think that if he still has no signs of returning symptoms after 6 months, then we can assume that he's outgrown the epilepsy." Well, that was great. The 7 years prior had been hellacious for him. So the doctor, the mother and the boy walked out of that doctor's office. And that was my mother and myself. We walked out of that doctor's office thinking that we had a new lease on life. We no longer had this mental problem that had plagued us for the last several years. We no longer had all the medications that kept me in a drugged state for all this time. So now we were able to see a future for myself. And that lasted until the next day that I got to school. And then I realized that even though the physical problem was gone, even though the drug problem was gone, the social stigma that I had built up from the time that I was in 1st grade to the time that I was in 8th grade was a lot more permanent than any of those things. All of the students that knew me throughout my entire school career knew me as somebody who was mentally deficient, somebody who they said was retarded, somebody who couldn't, who had to take medications in order to keep from going crazy. The teachers all just said he has severe learning disabilities and he's not going to function in class, so we're going to put him off in the corner and keep him away from everybody else. So that was the social stigma that I had, and that just didn't go away. After I started going back to school, I proceeded on, and when I turned 16 in high school, I finally said to my parents, this is no place for me. I'm never going to be able to succeed in this kind of environment. And so, with their blessing, I said, enough. And I stopped going to high school. I dropped out. I started going into real life. I got an unskilled labor job, thinking that I was just going to embrace the life of mediocrity that I was destined to have. And that's when something very interesting happened. Once I got away from that toxic environment of high school, where people didn't believe in me at all, they thought the worst of me, I started interacting with other people, and I started getting a hold of new ideas. And one of those ideas was the idea of self-talk. Now, we all experience self-talk. Some of us are more aware of it than others. But we all have these thoughts running through our minds all day long, telling us usually bad things about ourselves, saying we can't do this, we're not able to do that, we're not good enough here, we're not good enough there, we don't look the right way. All of this self-talk is destructive to us. This self-talk amounts to what Zig Ziglar referred to as stinking thinking. He said that you've got to get rid of this stinking thinking if you want to move ahead in life. And so I began doing that. I began replacing those negative thoughts with thoughts of optimism and thoughts of positivity. And I applied the words of Napoleon Hill, who said that, Napoleon Hill said, a man is what he is because of the dominating thoughts that he permits to occupy his mind. Now, if anybody wants to write that down, I'll say it again. A man is what he is because of the dominating thoughts that he permits to occupy his mind. And that word permits is very important. So as I did that, I noticed an immediate and a radical change in my life. A few months ago, I had been somebody who had such severe learning disabilities that I was unable to be taught. But now I started talking to other people and engaging in new ideas and new discussions. I found myself going to the bookstore, going to the library, and educating myself. And within a year after dropping out of high school, I was passing the GED and entering college. I entered college and I took business courses and accounting courses, and then I took computer courses, and I found that I had a real knack for programming computers and understanding business problems. So I went through college for a few years, a couple of years, and then at one point I said enough, and I decided to accept one of the job offers that had been handed to me, and I took a job working with small businesses in order to build software applications for small businesses. I started developing programs and becoming a business analyst and working through all of the different positions in that field until 15 years later, in 1994. Once again, I said enough, and I said we're not going to work for anybody else anymore. I'm going to become a solopreneur. And I went out and I started my own business, my own technology consulting business. And I ran that business, first starting with one customer and then two, and little by little, success after success, I built that business. And for the next 21 years, that was my primary function. During those 21 years, I also continued to raise my family, which I started a few years back before that. After 21 years, in 2015, my wife and I saw that our kids were all on their own. They were all successful, independent financially, taking care of themselves. They were all working in fields of their own passions. Nobody in my family was a victim of circumstance. They all were doing exactly what they wanted to do, and they were being happy and successful at it. And so at that point in time, we decided, okay, enough. Why don't we change our location and get out of California and move to Nashville, Tennessee, where we can begin a semi-retirement. And so I entered semi-retirement and came here to start writing and speaking. And so that's why I'm speaking here today, because I want to invite each one of you to think about what it is that you think about all day long. Because the things that you think about all day long, the things that run through the back of your mind, those are the thoughts of your lifetime. And if the thoughts of your lifetime are not pulling you into a life that you desire, do what Norman Vincent Peale said. He said, and I've proven that if you change your thoughts, you can change your world. Thank you.